one of the two final presentations of this very interesting and thought-provoking day. But we were also saying earlier that we fully understand that we are now the only thing between you guys and the drink. I'm just going to get on. Okay, so my name is Ella Cooper. I am from the Centre for International Training and Education. This is at the University of Leicester. I'm part of the senior management team in the department, and I work on a number of programs, including teacher development for EMI and EAPTD. This is my colleague, Daniel Jones. Well, he was my colleague until January when he moved to the University of Warwick. So he was my colleague. He worked in the senior management team also at Leicester. Now he is a director of studies at the University of Warwick, and he also teaches on the teacher development programs for EMI and EAPTD. So this is the title of our presentation, EMI Teacher Development in Ukraine during the 2022 escalation of the Russian Ukrainian war. Just to give a very brief presentation overview, we're going to focus on three areas. First, EMI provision in Ukraine pre-2022. So this is to set the context and to kind of set the scene for the presentation. We're then going to move into EMI Teacher Development Program for Ukrainian lecturers. This is the program that we developed and delivered from the University of Leicester. And then we're going to look at EMI in Ukraine in the future to basically wrap it up and see where we think we are going forward. Okay, so for the presentation, we're going to draw primarily on two sources. The first one is the Bolitho West report for the British Council, the internationalization of Ukrainian universities. The second source that we have used for this is kind of a government data. It's from the Ministry of Education, and it is called Study in Ukraine. This is a website. We're going to have a look at three areas: policy, language, and pedagogy. I'm going to pass it over to Daniel.
Okay, so starting off with the policy level, we look at macro level. We can see that from the key date here is 2014. And what we see here is a move after the revolution of dignity to move to engage with the wider world, but also on the counter to that is to move away from post-Soviet practices and also a reliance on post-Soviet international students coming into the country. At a slightly lower level, maybe not MISA level, maybe just institution level, we see that universities, and this is very similar to obviously other EMI contexts we've heard about today, there is the same reasons at an institution level for leading universities to increase international interactions and partnerships. And we see the same reasons in Bolitho West reported there. Looking at the numbers, the big number, you see this is the number of international students. It's very difficult to look at the number of home students on EMI programs, but we can look at the number of international students. And this is from the government data. We can see it peaking pre-COVID at 80,000. And so you can see there's some steady, sustained growth there going over the last 10 years. I think the 80,000 there, if you look at the rankings of the countries with the most international students coming into their HE sector, this would rank at about number 12, I think. So it's a significant number, it's a big number. Now, what I mentioned about that policy level of moving away from post-Soviet countries and reliance on post-Soviet international students, that's seen here, where I'm not sure if you can make it out, but what it is back in 2017-18, 30% of international students came from post-Soviet, and then by 2020, 2021, it's dropped by 10%. So that's definitely showing a move away, and that's represented in those numbers there. Ella will go into more details about what we can take from this, which is the countries where international students come from. But there you can see the variety of countries, India at the top there, and then Morocco, Turkmenistan, Azerbaijan, Nigeria, China, Turkey, Egypt, Israel, and Uzbekistan. So there's a mixture of regional, and it takes some picking through, but we'll look at it for language later. These are the top 10 universities And what's interesting here is that 8 out of the 10 have medical university in their title, which is sort of telling us something about what students are coming to study, and 9 out of the 10 have EMI medical programs. So that's definitely what the those international students are coming to study. Yeah.
Okay, so just focusing now on language, which obviously when we're talking about EMI is something that we refer to regularly. I'm going to look at the home students, the international students, and then the EMI teachers, the lecturers. So if I just draw on these quotations from Belief from West, first of all, Ukraine generally has a low level of English proficiency. In the 2016 English Proficiency Index, Ukraine was ranked 41st of the 72 countries included. So you can see here that the language level is recorded as quite low. Limited evidence of active or well-developed university policies for promoting or improving English, and there was no apparent systematic plan for internationalization and the promotion of English. So we can see here there is a lack of investment to improve the level of the home students in the universities. Moving on now to international students. So yeah, as Dan said, you can see here we've got quite a range of countries, which, I mean, if we look first of all at India, I mean, the 3 most common languages spoken in India, I believe, are Hindi, Marathi, and Bengali. There are then upwards of 300 more languages just in India alone. And if you look at, for example, Nigeria, I don't think you guys can see that, but down there on the list we have Nigeria. In Nigeria, I believe there are upwards of 500 languages spoken there. So although we don't know the level of the international students coming into the universities in Ukraine, what we can see is there is there's a very interesting language profile going on here. Definitely multilingual students that are coming into the universities. And if we have a look at these students with the home students, we can see that it's a very interesting cohort potentially right there. Moving on to the EMI teachers, fewer than 22% of academic teachers from 15 institutions reached the C1 benchmark suggested by the ministry. Some skills went as low as A1. And the weakest skill was speaking, with only 40% assessed at CEFRC level. So we can see here also that there is a very low level, or there is a very spiky profile here for the EMI teachers as well.
So the final section on this first part is looking at pedagogy, and the first thing to pick out here is that because of the low language level, the pedagogy is responding to that. It's about coping. It's about, how's it phrased, it seems to develop strategies to get through the lesson, albeit rather slowly. So pedagogy starts at that, of just trying to get through the lesson and cope with the language issues. And then the second thing to note here is that the EMI teachers feel that they're isolated and neglected, and there seems to be little support for them to develop their teacher development, particularly around pedagogy. So just to summarize this first part, what we can see is that there are reasons for EMI which are common to other EMI contexts we can see, particularly at an institution level, but we can see some really specific reasons for it as well, which are unique to Ukraine, which is around the geopolitical situation they obviously find themselves in. For the EMI teachers, we see, for the programs, we see that the challenges in many ways are similar to other EMI contexts, particularly around English language proficiency levels of the students and the teachers. Pedagogy at first is about adapting and coping, and there tends to be a lack of institutional support for teacher development. But up to 2022, what we can see is there was significant and sustained growth, as in many other EMI contexts. They were in a very good position to start developing and addressing these issues.
Okay, so now moving on to the second part of this presentation, where we look at the EMI program that we developed in the University of Leicester. I think first of all, important to look at the UK's response to the situation in Ukraine, so we can kind of piece this together a little bit. So first of all, the UK higher education response. So there is, I mean, you may or may not be aware, the UK-Ukraine Twinning Initiative, which offers short-term aid with a longer-term strategy. So this is an institution-to-institution collaboration model, which is coordinated by Cormac Consultancy Group and University UK. And what it does, it allows universities to provide real concrete support for our Ukrainian counterparts. So if we think about that and then move towards specifically the University of Leicester and how we engaged with this twinning initiative. So the University of Leicester has been providing support in a number of areas. Firstly, hosting 4 Ukrainian students for 1 semester in Leicester. These students were actually on an online program. The previous semester, we managed to get them over for study and gain credits in the university for the next semester. The course that we're on was the EAP classes for students, so we're continuing to provide those online classes for those students. Training practitioners on trauma and the psychological impact of war on students. Providing clothing for students who have lost access to their support networks due to conflict casualties, submitting collaborative research funding bids, discussing possible PG dual degree programs, and at a more collaborative level, because obviously our Ukrainian colleagues have lots to offer us as well, we've been receiving online seminar classes from Poltava State Agrarian University for University of Leicester students in the School of Law to provide a different perspective on European law. Okay, so if we now move specifically to our EMI team and the EMI program. So we've been together since 2016. We're a very, very small group, even smaller now that Dan has moved to Warwick. And in that time, we have delivered EMI training to universities in a number of locations, as you can see here, both online and in country. With the most recent being Ukraine. So I'm going to now focus specifically on the program that we offered. So the rationale, thinking about the twinning program, the twinning initiative, as a department with leadership from our head, we were keen to show solidarity and offer support to our Ukrainian counterparts. We had room on an open enrollment course, so we already had an EMI program ready to go. We had spaces on there, and we thought, okay, well, we can offer these spaces for free, fee waiver, to our Ukrainian colleagues. The promotion was through Cormac Consultancy Group, who I mentioned previously. And so the first course was July 2022. As I said, it was open enrollment. It was 50-50 synchronous, asynchronous. It was 5 weeks long, and on that one we had 4 Ukrainian lecturers. So then we thought, okay, well, we can do this again, and we can create a closed group solely for Ukrainian colleagues. And so we did that in October 2022, again, 50-50, synchronous, asynchronous, 5 weeks again, and this time we had 8 Ukrainian lecturers. Again, we offered this as a fee waiver course.
So the course itself, as Ella said, split asynchronous, synchronous. So the asynchronous part was hosted on a BLE. We've got Blackboard. They have Blackboard at Leicester, and that's a collection of recorded videos. Again, similar as what was mentioned, you've got to chop the videos up into small digestible bits, and then a selection of academic articles. And then it wraps around the online classes. So then they do follow-up tasks with discussion tasks online. And other activities which get them to think about developing that understanding and consider application to their context. So then the online classes held on Zoom. These are a mixture of, well, I say mini lectures, but the majority of the activities were really around, interactive activities in breakout rooms where they're really exploring the EMI issues that they've looked at online and identifying local themes and issues, thinking about practical applications for what they've looked at, practical approaches and solutions. And then they work towards a micro-teaching assessment at the end, so they put into practice some of the techniques and approaches that they've studied. The course content just runs through some probably very familiar territory to you. It starts off with theories of learning. We look at English language from the point of view of the teacher as well as the students. looking at pedagogic approaches, teaching techniques, and planning at a lesson level and at a curriculum level, and then finally assessment in EMI. So by the end, the participants were familiar with the reasons for EMI and how it shapes their teaching in their context. They've read expansively about it, about the issues and the approaches, and they've looked at how to adapt pedagogy, EMI pedagogy, to their context. And then they get to try out some techniques by the end of the course.
So just again, we had 8 participants. These participants were from 8 different institutions in Ukraine. 7 were actually joining from within Ukraine. So I think at this point it's worth mentioning, really, you know, we know what's happening in Ukraine, but really, you know, they were dealing with multiple issues and a lot of disruption on a daily basis. So they would have blackouts, you know, they would have electricity blackouts at certain times during the day. A number of them were displaced, so they were working in environments that were not familiar to them. Despite all of this, all of these issues that they were facing, their engagement and participation was overwhelming. So 4 of the 8 participants had 100% attendance for the 5 weeks. 2 of them missed just 1 lesson and 2 missed 2 lessons. The average time on Blackbird per active student was 22.4 hours, which was just enormous, considering everything that they were dealing with going through. We're just looking at a little bit of feedback, because obviously, you know, our experience is that they were just, you know, so engaged, so motivated. We were overwhelmed by, you know, what they were putting into it. But what did the participants get from it? And we can see here, we have course 1 where there were 4 Ukrainian lecturers, and then course 2 where there would be 8. Just to let you know that the rating was 1 to 5. Okay, so you can see here that they were overwhelmingly positive about the courses, and they got a lot from them themselves as well.
Okay, so to wrap up, the future of EMI, not really have an answer to this, but what we do know is that EMI was important. It was a growing part of the HE sector in Ukraine prior to the escalation of the war. What's going to happen? We can see there's an indication in sort of certain news reports of a planning for HE in a post-war Ukraine. So we would anticipate that the return of international students and the return of EMI programs would be a part of that. But how long it will take for, say, international students to return and some sense of normality to return, well, that's a bigger question, isn't it? In terms of teacher development, what we've seen here in our experience backs up what we looked at in the pre-war, the literature about Ukraine pre-war, is that, yeah, we need to provide solutions to immediate problems, to the local context of the EMI lecturers, but also there was an appetite to be really sort of, to take a longer view as well, to plan for, you know, to have a theory and research-based approach in order to plan for the future. And then finally, around EMI research in Ukraine, we think that as with the pandemic or other disruptions, this shows, as Ella talked about, people were displaced. There was a lot of disruption. So it shows perhaps that there's an opportunity there to look at to what extent EMI is defined and influenced by being located in a location. And when that's disrupted, it creates unique conditions. And perhaps more importantly, we think that the research is really needed to bring attention and to document the experience of the Ukrainian EMI teachers as they go through this experience. Okay, and our references there, and yeah, that's it. Thank you. And